things, which any normal person living can go out and do whatever they want and not be stopped. And I think
the drama surrounding Lexie Hull's resurgence was the kind of sports storyline that doesn't just play out in the box score. It unfolds like a cinematic comeback arc. The kind that reminds you why fans fall in love with teams in the first place. For weeks, Hull had been buried in a shooting slump so deep it felt like quicksand. Every miss seemed to pull her further under, each brick adding more weight to her shoulders, every open look poisoned by hesitation. 2 makes in her last 25 attempts from beyond the arc, a stat so unforgiving it practically screamed for a benching. Even her mother hadn't seen her sink a three-pointer since August 1st, a detail that said more about the drought than any percentage could. Now, the timing couldn't have been more cruel. The Indiana Fever were limping through one of their most precarious stretches of the season. Caitlin Clark, the team's superstar and offensive engine.
I mean, there were moments where, there's no transition defense for turnovers for scores, and
had been sidelined. Since mid-July with quad and groin injuries, her return date's still a mystery. Sydney Colson tore her ACL in the first quarter against Phoenix, her season ending instantly. As if that weren't enough, Ari McDonald fractured a bone in her foot during the same game. 2 point guards, gone within minutes, roster stripped. Of its floor generals, a playoff push, teetering on the edge. Next up, the Chicago Sky, hungry for revenge after losing every matchup to Indiana this season. If there was a night for the Fever to unravel, this was it. But what happened instead was the complete opposite of a collapse. It was a defiant chest out. The teeth-bared declaration that this Fever team is made of far sterner stuff than anyone imagined. They didn't just survive without Clark, Colson, and McDonald, they thrived, turning a game most predicted would be a desperate scramble into a showcase of resilience and adaptability. The Fever walked into Gainbridge Fieldhouse with no traditional point guard, no trade deadline options, and a playbook that Coach Stephanie White had to rewrite on the fly. This wasn't about drawing up the perfect scheme. It was about gutting through a must-win game with creativity, toughness, and trust. That trust extended to the most unlikely of heroes.
The union and all that stuff, I'm a listener. I'm learning this process. I'm young in it.
Kelsey Mitchell, the Fever's premier scorer, was suddenly tasked with running the entire offense. For 7 seasons, Mitchell had made her living by getting buckets, quick trigger threes, card-breaking drives, mid-range daggers. Her job was to score, not facilitate. But on this night, necessity rewired her instincts. She had to see the floor first, herself second. She had to balance when to attack and when to defer, when to force the issue, and when to let the game breathe. It was a delicate balancing act, and in the early minutes, you could see the adjustment. She hesitated at times, caught between her natural scorer's DNA and her new role as floor general. But then something clicked. The game slowed down for her. She began threading passes through gaps in Chicago's defense, setting up Boston, Cunningham, and Hull with looks they hadn't seen in weeks. She hit teammates in stride, whipped no-look passes to cutters, and fed Boston in the post with perfect timing. 8 assists later, a season high, Mitchell had proven that she could reinvent herself in one night. And she still found time to score in big moments, hitting floaters, step backs, and pull-ups when Chicago overplayed the passing lanes. And then, there was Hull. For 2 weeks, her shot had betrayed her. It wasn't just the misses, it was the way they seemed to chip away at her confidence. She was passing up open looks, shuffling her feet instead of letting it fly, second-guessing the muscle memory that had made her a knockdown shooter in the first place. But against Chicago, that mental fog lifted in spectacular fashion. It started with a single shot. Hull caught the ball beyond the arc, set her feet and let it go without hesitation. The rotation was pure, the arc perfect.
Stay in the moment, and I want to be grateful about it.
Would you like, though, a break after this? Like that seems.
And when it splashed through the net, the roar of the home crowd was matched only by the sight of Caitlin Clark leaping to her feet in celebration on the bench. That one make was like a breaker switch flipping. On Hull was herself again. She was cutting with intent, relocating for clean looks, and most importantly, shooting without fear. Chicago couldn't recover from that spark. Hull went on to drain 4 of her 6 three-point attempts, finishing with 17 points and a season-best performance that meant far more than the numbers on the stat sheet. This was about redemption. It was about a player stepping out of a shadow of doubt and reminding everyone, including herself, of what she's capable of. Her teammates knew it too. Leah Boston threw up the double three-point signs after one of her makes. Sophie Cunningham pulled her into a celebratory hug. This was a moment for the whole team, not just the shooter. They had willed her back to form, feeding her the ball even when the slump was at its worst. And now she was rewarding that faith in the biggest game of the season so far. Meanwhile, Boston anchored the paint with her usual blend of physical dominance and composure. She was the defensive spine of the team, deterring drives, gobbling rebounds, and keeping Chicago's bigs in check. Cunningham played the connective role, hustling for loose balls, spacing the floor, and making the kind of smart cuts that make a facilitator like Mitchell look even better. And all of it was happening in a system that, according to White, had been stripped down and simplified to accommodate the lack of point guards. But that simplicity didn't show up on the scoreboard. The Fever's offense hummed with purpose. The ball zipped around the perimeter, players cut hard to the basket, and everyone bought into the shared mission. Chicago, on the other hand, looked like they were chasing the game from the opening tip.
Making sure that we're in the right places for passes and just being more conscious of us having that ball.
Every defensive adjustment they made came a beat too late. Every offensive possession seemed to be swallowed up by the Fever's rotations. By the time the fourth quarter arrived, the only real question was the margin of victory. And when the final buzzer sounded, it was emphatic. 92-70. A 22-point blowout, their 4th straight win over the Sky this season, was another step toward the bottom of the standings. For Indiana, it was a statement that echoed far beyond one regular season win. What made this victory so significant wasn't just that they won shorthanded, it's how they did it. Hull's shooting confidence roared back to life. Mitchell unlocked a new facet of her game as a facilitator. Boston kept the interior on lockdown. And perhaps most importantly, the Fever proved they're not a one-player operation. Yes, Clark is the centerpiece, but this roster is deeper, smarter, and more adaptable than many gave it credit for. They didn't just plug holes in the absence of their stars. They reshaped their identity on the fly. Coach White has said repeatedly that this is one of the most connected teams she's ever coached. Nights like this prove it. You see it in the way they celebrated Hull's first made three like it was a game winner. You see it in Mitchell's willingness to sacrifice her shot attempts to get others involved. You see it in Boston's quiet leadership, holding the defensive line without fanfare. This isn't just talent, it's chemistry. It's culture. It's the kind of foundation that can carry a team deep into the postseason long after the adrenaline of a big win fades. For the rest of the league, this game should serve as a warning. The Fever aren't just holding steady without Clark, they're evolving. When she returns, they'll have a roster full of players who've been tested in ways that make them sharper, more confident, and more dangerous. They'll have the resilience born from games like this, where adversity could have broken them, but instead hardened them into something stronger. On paper, it was just one win in the standings. But in reality, it was a pivot point. The night Hull found her rhythm again. The night Mitchell became a point guard. The night the Fever announced to the league that they are far more than the sum of their injuries. And when the playoffs roll around, this may be the night we look back on as the moment they became a true contender. What about you? You think this battle-tested version of the Fever can make a serious run before Clark returns? And once she's back, could this be the most dangerous team in the league? Let's talk about it in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most defining wins of the season, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, so you never miss the next breakdown. This Fever team is just getting started.